if we could fast forward ourselves 30 years to now, the world is going to feel so different. We have to get from here to there, and that process of change is not one that, as humans, we're good at doing that fast, you know, again and again and again.
Hello, I'm Carol Spalding, the host of Worth Quoting. Today we have an author and a speaker nationally known, Ruggles Radcliffe. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you here, and you've got some real exciting things, I think, to talk about, some life experiences, some good suggestions about people, and particularly women, and how they deal with stress and body image and all those things. In fact, you've written a book called Dance Naked in Your Living Room, Handling Stress and Finding Joy. Now, how could this be possible to find joy by dancing in your living room naked?
Well, it can be taken as a literal, you know, invitation or a metaphorical one. So some people, actually, I've heard so many stories about people who actually clean their house, you know, shoo everybody out of the house and shut the windows, shut the door, put on music, and actually clean their house naked. So, and there just are a lot of fun things that are possible here. But, you know, even just the idea of finding some freedom and being able to let loose and begin to discover more joy in our lives is an invitation that many of us need in today's world.
How do you do this? How do you find more joy in your life? Is this something, an inner struggle, or is this something from outside? What is it, getting rid of things?
Well, you know, what I've noticed is that as the world's stress level increases, and so our individual stress level increases, we end up relying on a handful of coping techniques, you know, things like eating and drinking and smoking and letting our anger out and so on, sometimes gambling or so on.
Rage driving?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And we do that because we're not taught what else to do. We don't have any other place that we learn about stress management. We don't teach our elementary school kids about Stress Management 101, and we don't include it in high school, college. You know, it's beginning to be in some health curriculum and so forth. So we expect people to stumble on something that works. So as human beings, we just find one thing, we repeat it again and again and again, and we get in patterns that are oftentimes destructive in our lives and leave us really vulnerable to stress. So what I advocate is to take a proactive stance, and instead of just finding that one coping technique or relying on whatever we stumbled upon, to say, gee, could we create a list, for example, of 25 things? And this is, I really encourage people to sort of go after a couple of dozen choices that are positive for them. And it's going to be different. You know, what makes you feel comfortable or what helps you unwind is going to be different than for me or for anybody else that we talk to. So it's a personalized thing. It's not just a given formula. And then when we find ourselves all wound up, if we can do things like take a few minutes before we walk in the house to center ourselves, or I talked to somebody who keeps bubbles in his car so that when he gets in really tight traffic jams or something, he pulls out bubble stuff and blows bubbles on the, you know, in these traffic jams. Can you imagine delighting himself and also the people around him in the car? You know, so there are any number of strategies, and in Dance Naked there's about 120 or so. But then in the process, when we cool down in a more positive way, we can then take time to begin to say, what do I need to change in my life so my life gets on a healthier track, so I can live more of a joyful sort of life. So I think of joy as moments of connection, moments of peace, moments of everything's going to be okay, and that comes from taking some time to unwind in positive ways.
So this is a consciousness. It's an awareness. It's a building alternative strategies to just sort of being addicted to speed and the stress and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. It's having some skills so that we can really apply them in our lives when we're feeling stressed. And then, yes, beginning to make some new choices, and we do that consciously so that we are beginning to live a life that's healthy for us and not just sort of slamming into our futures.
Okay, well, talk about the food issue, because I know that you know a lot about that. In fact, you had a professional, I guess, job for a number of years at an eating disorders clinic.
Right. Actually, that's how I got introduced to the topic. You know, I'm a woman living in a female body, obviously, in a culture where in this day and age, we're supposed to be a particular size to be beautiful. In fact, you and I were chatting before the show about the Miss America pageant as we watched the women get skinnier and skinnier over the years. And we watch our news anchors get skinnier and skinnier and so on. The messages abound about that thinness is what we need to be successful. And it's really set up a message, particularly to young women, that this is the ticket to their future. And so we're seeing a rise in eating disorders. And that's a little frightening that our obsession with thinness can actually have such a detrimental side effect. But what's intriguing to me is that a whole lot of women, in fact, I would say the majority of women, feel uncomfortable in their bodies. I mean, I don't know how many people can stand in front of a mirror without their clothes on and go and just say, I love what I see. I wouldn't change
I don't know anybody who can say that.
Yeah, and so we're in a world which is really judging us. And my concern, we might just sort of laugh and say, gee, that's superficial. Who cares if women worry about their weight? But my concern is that if women wake up in the morning and zip up their jeans and go, oh, why can't I lose 5 pounds? Why can't I lose these 10 pounds? Why can't I? Why can't I? And they've been on their diets and the weight comes back and all that kind of thing. That lack, it begins to go inside them and they go, well, if I can't lose 5 pounds, how could I take on the homeless problem? How could I do anything about the environmental,
It disempowers you completely.
Exactly, that I think it begins to undermine our confidence. And so if we're sending out the messages to young women that you better be a size 4 or a size 6 or whatever before you go for that job on Wall Street, I'm wondering how many people actually get turned back from doing their dreams. So, as well as the unhealthy side effects of eating disorders and so on.
So, is your message that go ahead and lose that 5 pounds, you can really do it? Or is your message, you got 5 pounds, doesn't matter,
no,
keep going?
My message is that I think we need to be equally tolerant about body size and variation in our world as we need to be about color issues, about race issues, about religious issues, about gender issues. We've asked
the new diversity training.
Yeah, we've asked ourselves to be, as a set of peoples, to be tolerant of so many different arenas, but we have not brought size into that discussion. And people's bodies are different shapes and sizes, different heights, different bone densities, different. We've got different ancestries that make us, fall in different patterns. There is no one definition of beauty, I believe, and I would really like that to be part of our national conversation.
All right, but you've talked a little bit about the eating disorder that makes you too thin that will kill you as a young person, but then you've got this eating disorder that will make you too fat that will kill you as an older person.
Yes, we are as a nation growing larger, and it's an interesting thing. It's part of our conversation again as a country saying, why is this happening? And there's some interesting theories out there. We're not active enough, we don't exercise enough. We watch too much TV, so we're just sitting around on the couch,
potato.
Or computer potato or what. There's going to have to be a new term here with all the web surfing and so on. And we've talked about, the latest theory is that maybe we're eating too many carbohydrates and not enough protein and fat, and so that maybe we've been, eat for the last 20, 30 years, been moving into a diet that actually makes us larger as people. I don't know that we know all the reasons yet. But I also know that there's a bit of a fat phobia that even creeps into our research. There's a fellow out of Duke University who's doing some interesting counter research, which has made it into some of the major medical journals and caused a bit of disruption in our paradigms, because our paradigm is that fat is unhealthy, and that fat is bad, and that being overweight will kill us. And probably there is a point at which that's true, but the research is showing that maybe we need to question. In other words, if we come into our research with the paradigm fat is unhealthy, then we do research that proves that. So I just take that with a grain of salt and wonder what we will come to in the future. Because, for example, if looking at two sets of people, one set of people are thin and one set of people are larger people, but the thinner people aren't active and the larger people are, in terms of vein health and heart health, the larger people who are active in this counter research are healthier actually than the thinner people. So it's an interesting new frontier that I don't know that we know where it's going to land yet, but I certainly know we may have gone too far.
I'm listening to your choice of words saying thinner and larger.
Yes. Well, the word fat used to be just a word that was descriptive, and these days it's a word that is such a derogatory label. I mean, we wouldn't. Now there is the National Association of NAFTA. I forget exactly what it is, but fat acceptance, I think it is, and they're very encouraging of us to say fat and be comfortable with the word fat, but there are an awful lot of people who are still not comfortable with it. So I try and find alternative phrasing, you know, round and curvaceous and abundant or whatever.
Right. Well, you've written some things, many books, Handling Stress, Finding Joy, Body Prayers, Finding Body Peace, The Journey of Self-Acceptance. How important is that? Just accept who you are and be healthy as you can. And
well, I think it gets back to the, my concern is that when we focus on body image, and part of this comes, I know, because in a faster society, we make judgments about people so quickly. The research shows that, you know, in about 8 seconds, a person walks in for a job interview, and the interviewer has made a conclusion about us, and that's certainly not based on our intelligence or our talent and enthusiasm or even necessarily our resume. It's based on that, you know, getting a sense of the person as they walk in visually. And kids know that, we all know that, whatever age we are, and we're going to be living longer and staying productive longer. And my concern is that that visual piece is going to be even more limiting. I had a conversation with somebody recently who was into video technology, you know, the little video cameras that are going to be sitting soon on top of all of our computers so that we can have face-to-face conversations over the net or, you know, as we email or whatever. And I'm wondering whether we're going to become a face society, you know, and that appearance piece is going to be even more important than it is today. And what that's, you know, what the ramifications are. I certainly don't know how it's going to impact us, but I worry a bit, you know. Or maybe it'll be that on Monday we can look blonde and 22. We'll have alternative imaging that we can program into our computer, and so that we'll have all sorts of different personalities. I don't know. But I worry about us, you know, limiting our sense of another person just based on appearance.
Well, I would too. You also have books about to the youth. You're trying to address this message to young people.
Oh yeah. Are you speaking to? I mean, all the books on stress. And
yeah,
the books
handling
on,
stress and ending violence.
Yes. Oh, the About to Burst book.
Yes.
Well, the school shootings have disturbed me deeply, as I'm sure they have everybody. And so it's like, what can we do? And in fact, I just went to a Safe Start 2000 conference recently, where schools from all around the state of California were coming together and talking about these issues. And so many of the solutions were focused on, you know, having plainclothes policemen on the campus. They're called security personnel, I guess. There are various different terms, but having metal detectors and, you know, the system, being able to coordinate the courts and the police and
treating the symptom and not the cause.
Exactly. The administrators and counselors and all those pieces are absolutely important. But my concern is that if this, again, the stress level in our world is going up, and so the stress level not only in us as adults, but in our children. At young ages, kids are feeling stressed. So by the time they're teenagers, they're feeling an awful lot of pressure. Their lives are about to unfold before them. You know, they're going through that coming of age kind of stuff, changes in hormones and so on. And along with all the various family conflicts and neighborhood conflicts and so on, you can just feel them about to burst. And unless we teach them skills about what to do when you're stressed, my fear is that for the people who are living under great pressure, they're going to snap somehow. And sometimes that snaps into binge drinking or driving too fast and hitting a tree, or, you know, I mean, there are any number of things that people do, but some people pick up guns. So I would love it if we taught our young people, you know, on sort of a nationwide curriculum basis, stress management, alternatives that they can do, and, you know, what stress does to the body and how they personally can intervene so that when they're about to burst, they've got choices.
You've got this exercise of listing the 25 things that help you reduce your stress, but in case somebody's just sort of like, I don't have 25 things, I don't have 2.
Exactly.
What suggestions do you have?
Well, that's why the book is there. I mean, there's 120 in the About to Burst and also in Dance Naked, because we are not taught that. So often, it struck me as absolutely necessary when I was first doing a workshop, and I asked the people to put down what else can we do instead of eat or drink or whatever. And people were stuck at 2 to 5. 5 was the maximum list, and I went, oh boy. You know, no wonder. I mean, when we are really not taught to care for ourselves, to nurture ourselves, to be good to ourselves, particularly as women, because that's, you know, that would be, we're supposed to be caretaking other people. But I don't think that men are either, because men are taught to be tough and go out and achieve and not be focusing on, and I'm obviously being very stereotypical here, but it's very much part of the conditioning of most of us. So we're left without those skills, without being armed, if you will,
Really?
for this society that's going to, again, slam down on us with this higher and higher pace. I don't think it's going to get better in that regard. I think it's going to get even more.
I want to go with just one more detail on this. Of the 125 that might be in the book, what would be one that most people could do that they wouldn't think of?
Oh, well, I'm interested in a couple different things. I'm interested in things that you can sort of do anywhere in most of the ideas are things that are free and sort of 5-minute do anywhere.
5 minutes or
we
less.
all have breathing. We all can take deep breaths. We can all carry around a little 59-cent spiral notebook so that we can, go, we can grump down, or, we can get our feelings out in writing. I talked about the bubble stuff. We can keep clay in our desk. We can, learn to stretch and move to get stress out. We can talk to a friend. We can play music loud or quiet, whatever, whether it's hard and fast music or soft and soothing. Different people need different stuff. We were talking about the ocean and the nature. I think nature is one of the most healing forces. And many times we're stuck in buildings and we're stuck in classes or we're stuck in this, our jobs or whatever, and we don't have much natural time anymore. So that kind of deliberately going out for a walk or sitting under the stars or going to sit at the beach or in a park or, depending on where we live and what's accessible to us. But almost anybody has that kind of access to the outside. Even if the outsides are not pleasant, there still are the stars, there still is air, there still is, that original world we were given.
Or even meditation or going somewhere in your own head, not necessarily.
Exactly. And if what's very fun to do is to brainstorm with a group of people. So a classroom could do this together, so that the 4th graders could do this or 12th graders could do this and start brainstorming. So we learn from each other, because it's very hard to come up with that list of 25 if we're just sitting by ourselves and making that list, thinking, gee, how do I do that?
Right. You've said more than once that the stress of the world is greater, just like the stress of individuals is greater.
Sure.
What makes you say that?
Well, I'm thinking back to, there was a book in the early 70s called Future Shock, which really shocked the nation, about the fact that we were going to have more than one job in our lifetime. At the time, when the book came out, everybody picked a company and stayed with that company forever. Now we laugh at that concept. It's so rare. So we were taught that we were going to have, this book said, we were going to have, up to 3 careers in our lifetime. It talked about the families breaking up, that the nuclear family wouldn't be as stable anymore, that there'd be divorces and, reblendings of families. They talked about the fact that there'd be psychological, ramifications of this, and there would be more depression. We're living that now. This is the future. It shocked us 30 years ago. Well, if we could project out to the next 30 years, my guess is that the change is going to be equally revolutionary, simply from the fact of what communications technology is going to do. How fast we can get information to and from each other, and the way that's going to change our jobs and the way we live in the world. If we could fast forward ourselves 30 years to now, the world is going to feel so different. We have to get from here to there, and that process of change is not one that, as humans, we're good at doing that fast, again and again and again. If we stop to think about the revolution of the railroad, when that first was making an impact during the 1800s, it was probably that century that the railroad, came in and then really completely revolutionized life. We had 100 years to have it open new territory and begin to ship goods and to redefine how a town was and how people worked and what jobs were available because of the railroad. And when the phone came, we had
plenty of time. Yeah,
we had a few decades to get used to what a telephone would do to the world and how it would change things and jobs and so on. We don't have that now. The computer, there's a new generation of computer software and technology every 6 months, and there's revolutionary chip design about every 18 months. Completely changes what the world can do in every 18 months.
So is breathing exercise going to help with that?
Well, I think part of it is being able to be adaptive, with saying we're going to have to learn and change our entire lifetime and enjoy that process. So having a framework of being open about that, rather than sort of digging in our heels and going, uh-oh, the good old days, I wish we could do we can't do the good old days. The good old days will never be again. Maintaining values, the inner values of what are important to us, and trying to bring those into our outer world, I think is going to be the balancing piece to that. Because if the world is moving so fast out here, we have to have something to counterbalance that. And that inner, what our spiritual values are, however we want to define that, a whole set of values that keep us on track and make us choose what's important. so that we really determine our priorities consciously rather than just kind of going through routine. I think that's going to help the balance a lot.
I think in prior generations, those values came from traditional things and the lack of change in religious upbringing and community values and stuff. Those things are not there to build that inner strength and that inner value. So what is the substitute for that?
Well, I think that will have to be part of what we learn as a set of humans. And you hear in society that could we go back to that neighborhood sense? Could we go back to the, where the religious institutions in the community kind of defined what was right and comfortable? And I don't think those formulas are going to work. And that doesn't mean that I'm not saying any one of those pieces. Neighborhoods are still going to be important, and family will be important, and religious institutions and beliefs and so on. But we're going to have different ways that they impact us because the nature of life will be so. And I don't know the answer. So I think it's a process of conversation.
I think so too.
Process of learning as we go, and we will make mistakes.
Right.
And we'll probably have to learn from the pain. We'll see the pain like we see the shootings. I think the shootings are a cry or a symptom for something's out of balance here. So can we look at them and ask some deeper questions and say, gee, what do we need to change in our world as a whole, or our society, or our people? What do we need to do differently versus can we put in a new safety system or a new gun monitoring system, or I mean, those things are fine, but there's really an invitation here to go deeper.
I think there is too. One of the things they're finding out is all this drug use in young people, their prescription drugs. Everybody's trying to keep the lid on their kids through
even up to the little, the little preschoolers.
Right, so they aren't learning how to cope with little frustrations, much less the bigger ones.
No, I know, that's very frightening. So part of that goes back to the world is moving so fast. We've got, both parents working many times, and they're working long hours, and they're commuting, and their, life is just, and then the kids are trying to go to Little League or doing this after school thing or whatever.
Totally overscheduled.
Oh boy, people are just, there's no time to breathe, and there's no time to parent. There's no time to be with each other. There's no time. So I think ultimately it gets back to that, what are our values and what are our priorities and what choices do we make? So it's intriguing to me that the simplicity movement, we began to hear about voluntary simplicity in the early 90s. And it was a very rare thing that you'd hear about somebody who would say, nope, I'm not taking that promotion, or nope, I'm not taking that raise. I'd rather do this job than that. And now it's not so infrequent. And my guess is that, and we're seeing more people work at home and trying to create alternative ways of being productive so that they can grab hold of their lives and live in a way that makes sense to them rather than.
I just wonder about media and role models, because I think there is one role model out there. This is the perfect body. This is the perfect size for women. This is the perfect age.
The perfect job, the perfect life,
the perfect family.
The perfect house, the perfect outfit, the perfect,
Right, and if you don't have it, you aren't anybody.
Well, that's the message, isn't it? And it's such a superficial message, and it leaves us vulnerable to have to chase all that stuff.
Right. So do you drop out? Do you keep trying to achieve that or something else? Pick and choose?
Well, I think if we can step back and say, our life doesn't have to be dictated by what we see in television, or what we see in the magazine ads or whatever, and can we consciously choose that? Now, it takes probably a bit of maturity to go through that. It may be that we have to go out into our first jobs and, try and live this life and feel the rat race and then say, gee, now what is important to us and what is not important to us? Although it's interesting to me, our conversation about Generation X and now Generation Y, and the fact that they're doing things differently than the people before, may be, in a sense, a backlash to this crazy rat race.
The revolution, the backlash, the dropping out.
Right, so we thought Gen X was dropping out. Well, it turns out what they're doing is dropping into the internet world and creating a whole new way of doing business, and it may be that they can they may rat race around internet businesses just as much as we rat raced around other things. But on the other hand, they may find a way of making a living without it having to drain so much energy or so much time from life and have time left over to do other things.
If there are other things, but it seems like it's work, 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 and that's all there is, and people are driven, and that's it's a 24/7 kind of world, and
Isn't that too bad?
Yeah.
Isn't it too bad?
I mean, you can shop till you drop almost any time and eat all the time, and
well, see, we're wondering,
sleeping is in the way.
Why are so many people on Prozac or any other number of antidepressants? And depression is real. So I don't begrudge the use and don't say that that's wrong, but when it's so prevalent, something's out of balance. So we can either, again, just kind of live that out of balance and go crazy slowly, you know, or we can stop and say, let's question this and figure out a different way of balancing. But it would mean that as a culture, we end up having to value less that 24/7 work ethic that you're talking about.
Right. We're interested in high-performing teams. How do you participate as a high performer and still have some sort of life for yourself?
Right. That's a big question. And parents have to get involved in that, and the kids have to get involved in that, and the coaches and so on. So can we open up a crack for some other values or not? And right now we don't open a crack very big, very wide for other things. We still are very achievement focused. And it's, to be honest, it's part of what has made America great. You know, we are a very, you know, let's go get them, let's have a dream, let's pioneer something, and that is one of our incredible strengths as a nation, and that's imbued in us, I think, as people. But each of us has to find a balance point. Nobody can do it for us.
No, and the best way, we've got just about a minute, the best way to find your balance point is how?
I would say personal, getting to know oneself, what's important. And that takes silence. That takes a few minutes here and there, you know, by oneself journaling, sitting out in nature, sitting in front of a fire, under the stars, whatever, and saying, what's important to me? Who am I? What makes me feel good? What makes me feel bad? Can I move towards the direction of more happiness and more joy and make choices, whether they're job choices or relationship choices or neighborhood choices, etc., that support me?
All right, thank you for that suggestion. I think we should all do that. This is Carol Spalding with Rebecca Ruggles Radcliffe, author and speaker. And the program is worth quoting from Florida Community College at Jacksonville. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Rebecca, for sharing with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.